What's up from Mankato? It's your favorite trio of Vikings beat writers, Sam Ekstrom, Arif Hasan, Luke Inman, ZoneCoverage.com. It was cold, there was a lot of wind, a little bit of rain today at Vikings practice, but they got through it in a little bit of a strange practice. There were players kicked out, there were a lot of drops, quarterbacks had a tough time throwing because of the breeze, and it ended in a very boring 2-minute drill with a lot of punts and ending in an interception. It was not the cleanest day of practice. I think everyone just wants to play a game at this point, Luke. You know, they're getting to the point where they're getting cranky with each other. We've seen a lot of shoving matches, some pushing, and obviously the Treadwell fight a little bit earlier this week. We're getting to the point where camp is starting to drag a little bit.
Yeah, certainly we're hitting the dog days of summer here. A rare chilly day today. Obviously that had a huge effect on the passing game. Took a while for those quarterbacks to adjust to the heavy winds out there. But, you know, at this point, I think they're ready to go play in Buffalo, which is just under a week away. And really, for us, we're just fine-tuning those last few spots. The linebacker position, for example, Emmanuel Lemur one day, Edmund Robinson the next. Now you got Ben Gideon, the rookie from Michigan, 4th-round pick, thrown in as a wild card too. So figuring out those last few starting spots and those sub packages is going to be huge.
Yeah, Reef, I feel like the theme of this week has been the fading away of a few guys that we might have thought had a chance early last week. Chiefly, Freddie Tagaloa has kind of fallen off the radar a little bit. Caleb Jones had a few drops today. It hasn't been nearly as good. Even Elijah Lee hasn't really been in that conversation for that linebacker job. It's kind of down to 3, it seems like, between Robinson, Lemur, and Gideon. The picture is coming a little more clearly into place at this point.
Yeah, I think so, and I think you can tell from the rotations that they said, who's taking first-team reps, second-team reps, etc. We still have some level of uncertainty about the 3 technique position, the center position, and I guess we've increased the uncertainty at weakside linebacker by throwing Gideon's name into the mix. But I think when you look at sort of the second and third level of the roster, we're kind of getting a clear idea of who the Vikings favor. I mean, the fact that, for example, they've had each of the centers play guard. Maybe that's not a good indication that they don't trust their guards, but it's a good indication that if they don't trust their guards, they can feel a little bit more comfortable letting them go when they have to figure out who their 9 offensive linemen are, who their 7 active offensive linemen are going to be. And given, I think, the underperformance of the guards, that's maybe a pretty good sign that the Vikings are looking at ways to make those tough decisions at the bottom of the roster. You take a look at Eric Wilson, who's called out by the coaches pretty recently. He's a guy that a lot of people predicted might make the roster despite being an undrafted free agent. You take a look at some of the safeties. I think that we're seeing sort of the bottom of the team kind of just firm up, and we're figuring out who might make the team and who might not.
Luke, I want to ask you about the quarterback situation right now in the backup role. Keenum and Heineke. I think early in training camp, a lot of people were thinking Heineke had a really good chance, and I think he still does, but it seems like Keenum has really firmed up his grasp on the number 2 spot. He's looked a lot better and kind of indicative of the last few days for Heineke. He throws an interception at the very end of practice to Jaron Kearse that was a really poor throw.
Yeah, no doubt. I think at the end of the day, I'd still heavily favor Keenum for that backup spot, even almost maybe an 80-20 type of percentage or ratio there. I think everybody just wants Heineke to kind of step up and kind of win that number 2 spot. But right now, he's flashed a few days early on, but so far I think more consistently Keenum with the 2s, I think has kind of proven his role as that backup guy, and a guy that if you really needed to depend on somebody to not turn the ball over too much and to help you win a game, I think right now clearly, as much as again maybe the fan base wants Heineke to show up, there's just not a big enough sample size. Obviously, he got hurt last season too, so he needs to have really a big preseason, I think, and he should get his fair chance and a lot of reps, not just in Buffalo but throughout the preseason. But right now, clearly for me, Keenum's the guy.
Speaking of quarterbacks, Arif, how would you evaluate Bradford's play through a week and a half? And to my eye, he's been pretty good.
To me, I think he's been pretty good so-so, somewhere in between those two. And I think that a lot of it comes down to figuring how aggressive he's going to be early in camp. We didn't see him go downfield all that much. We did see a couple of those downfield throws later in camp. And despite being a very accurate deep passer both in Philadelphia and last year for the Vikings, he's had a lot of issues, getting that ball to receivers on those deep passes in camp. We saw in a couple of mistakes today. We saw a fantastic touchdown throw to Diggs, so we know he obviously has the ability to get the ball where it needs to be on those deep throws. But just in general, I think that the promise of explosive plays we were given at some point early in the offseason, I don't think has really made itself clear, and a lot of that's on Bradford. I think that a lot of those checkdowns are not necessarily by design. For example, we saw early in the 2-minute drill today that Bradford was checking down on third and then on fourth down as well, and the situation was that the offense was down 5 points and needed to score a touchdown. So that's a pretty frustrating a problem to deal with. But just in terms of evaluating his individual throws, I think he's been extremely accurate, both short and intermediate. Intermediate, I think, is the area where he was maybe the least accurate relative to his peers last season. Really accurate intermediate here, hasn't thrown a lot of interceptable balls. And that's good. He can keep the offense on schedule. But in terms of setting up the framework that the Vikings gave us, more explosive plays, I'd like to see a little bit more.
Luke, big feature up at zonecoverage.com today on Stephen Weatherly, the promising defensive end. Just give us a quick synopsis of what you wrote and what you took away from that interview with Stephen.
Well, I think heading into camp, I've had a lot of eyes on, a lot of the second-year guys that didn't play a lot. Guys like, J. Ron Curse, obviously, Anthony Harris, we're going to keep our eyes on a little bit, Stephen Weatherly, David Morgan's got a huge role coming up, Mac Alexander, but Weatherly, long, lanky, and very fast. He stood up as a linebacker at Vanderbilt in the 3-4 defense, looks to kind of take hold for that number 4 defensive end spot. You got the big 3, Brian Roberson, Donnell Hunter, and obviously Everson Griffin, but behind those guys, kind of that number 4 spot was wide open heading into this year. I think Weatherly, certainly one of those guys that Mike Zimmer can mold, has all the traits that you want. A 7th round pick, maybe not a ton of production. What you want late in those rounds, you want the traits that you can develop. Certainly Mike Zimmer has been known to be able to develop some of those guys. Stephen Weatherly, great interview, by the way. Make sure to check that out, like you said, on Zone Coverage.
Vikings right back at it tomorrow, and then the day after that, their night scrimmage at Blakesley Stadium. Things to watch and listen for the next few days: injuries. We're getting to the point where some of these injured guys may not be able to participate in the first preseason game. Jerick McKinnon still very limited in team drills. He's coming around, but he's not quite there yet. Latavius Murray still hasn't participated. Riley Reef still hasn't. And Laquan Treadwell out with an apparent muscle strain. So some guys to watch for in the next few days. And if they miss game reps here a week from today, that could be serious toward their candidacies for either roster spots or depth chart spots. And we should get an updated depth chart from the Vikings pretty soon here. Arif, any final thoughts of what you're looking for the next couple days?
Not a ton to add. I think everyone kind of knows what we're looking for in the preseason. We want to see someone take charge of that center position. Not just remain consistent in those snaps, which I think both Easton and Elfland have had a problem with, but make sure they can get to the second level, do all the things that you're asking the center to do. Same thing with the 3 technique and weak side linebacker spots. Those are the positions I'll be honing in on as we watch those preseason games. But I think that prior to that, like you said, are the injuries that we have to watch out for, and not a ton else. We want to see the offense evolve. We want to see the defense stay consistent, be solid. But individually, I think those 3 positions I'm going to look at the most.
We're already on the downhill. The second half of training camp is in full force. Hopefully a warmer day tomorrow in Mankato. Sam, Arif, and Luke will be back with you then. Talk to you soon.